Submitting your proposal and following up like a boss. One of the big questions I get from people who is what to do after they send a proposal. Because sometimes a client ghosts you and doesn't, and it's not obvious how to follow up with them without seeming desperate. How long do I wait? What do I say? Um, how angry should I get? Like, how forceful should I get? So we are going to talk about that today. You can ask questions as we go along with the Q&A tab. It looks like a little chat bubble with a question mark in it. And yeah, and while we're waiting for people to come in, let me know where you're calling in from. I'm curious. I know a few people are on the other side of the world and are going to be watching the replay. Vancouver, Silicon Valley, DC, the great state of Minnesota. Awesome. Obviously, you can hear me, so that's good. So let me pull up my slides while people are joining. Halifax. Okay. All right, cool. So what we're going to talk about today is based on lesson 4 of my automatic proposals course. Let's full screen that. Go like this just so I can make sure you see what I see. Great. Okay, I'm going to full screen that. And we can jump right in. Don't forget, if you have questions as we go along, find that Q&A tab and post it in there. And after I'm done going through the material, I will go through and answer each one of those. I think this should take less than an hour, but if we go long, if there are a lot of questions, I can hang around. So, all right, submitting your project proposal. The last thing I would do before I send the project proposal is make sure that you put an expiration date in it. So however you write your proposal, whatever the format is, whether you put this in the cover letter or at the end, I usually put it in the fifth page, the last section of my 5-page proposal template. But it doesn't really matter how you write the proposal. This is sort of a secret weapon that adds the hook that you need to follow up without looking desperate. So somewhere in your proposal, make it clear that it expires. It's not just good forever. Any good client will understand that their business landscape will change, your business situation might change, and the overall market might change. So, whatever you put into this proposal, it's time sensitive. It's based on the current situation that the client is in and the desired outcome that they want to get to. So you don't want clients treating this like it's a once and forever price. So whatever it is that you put in there, in a year, that price is not still going to be good. Certainly not in 10 years, right? So I think it's intuitive to imagine that these prices aren't good forever. So make it explicit in the proposal how far or how long these prices last, how far into the future you'll honor these prices. I like to go with 14 days, and I'll give you very specific reasons why and exactly how to follow up across that course of those 2 weeks at the end, or sort of in the second half of this talk. And the only exception I would make for this is if you knew for sure that the project contact was going to be going on vacation or they were going to be out for some reason, whatever there's holidays, something like that. So in absence of that, I would make it for 14 days, and you'll see exactly why in a bit. All right. So once you're done with your proposal and it has an expiration date in it, I would just send it. I would email it to the client. I would add sort of reminders in my calendar to follow up with them on specific dates that we're going to talk about. And then I would completely forget about it. I would just not think about it at all. I wouldn't worry about whether or not I priced it too high or what they're going to say or what they're going to do. Instead, to keep my mind off of that, what I would do is go get some more clients. So I would in the time after it's sent, I just forget about it and go back to my normal business of trying to get more clients. Whatever your prospecting activities are, whether it's inbound or outbound or networking or flogging your network for referrals, go back to that, because if you can get a sales interview set up while you have a proposal or two in play out in the world, there's something magical about that. It makes you feel more confident. It makes me feel more confident. It's like, oh, well, I've got this possible project lined up. If it comes through, I might have to postpone anything else that I managed to scare up, but that's fine. That's a good problem to have. You can deal with that. So once I send the proposal, then I would do whatever the thing is that you do to attract leads and try and get people into a sales interview. I would do more of that. I would optimize for that in the 2 weeks after you send a proposal. Ideally, you'll have 2 or 3 or 4 proposals out at the same time. And you can honestly say to people in your follow up that you've got a few proposals out. Uh, Yours is the first one I sent, so I'll give you first right of refusal. If one of these others looks like it's going to close, I'll just out of courtesy, I will come back and let you know, hey, you were first in line. One of these other deals looks like it's going to close. Do you want to do this or not? And it's totally fair. It puts some pressure on them to make a decision, and it's real. It's genuine. You're not making it up. So it creates so having a few proposals out there or being in talks with a number of people, having something in your pipeline makes this phase a lot easier to deal with, and I think increases your odds of closing the deal. There we go. Email it to the client, set your follow-up reminders, and then forget about it. So a big question that I get is, shouldn't I set up a meeting to present the proposal live? And I know plenty of people who do this very well. Blair Enns talks about presenting like a one sheet kind of summary of the different options. And it works. I know it works. It's not the way I do it though. So the way I do it is that I create the PDF, I email it to the buyer, whoever is the decision maker, and that's it. I don't present it live. And there are a few reasons why I don't present it live. The first one is I feel like it would make me lazy in the sales interview while I'm running the why conversation. It would make me a little bit lazier in that conversation. I might end like at an hour because an hour has gone by, even though I haven't gotten all the important questions answered. If I knew that I was going to have a second chance to kind of spin the proposal into something that's going to convince them to buy. So I don't want that kind of easy out. I want to put all the pressure on me to in the one phone call to get all the information I need, and just know that if I can't come up with sort of value proposition, some kind of estimated or guesstimated value of their desired outcome in that phone call, I'm probably not going to write the proposal in the first place. So I would just be like, hey, I just don't see a fit here. I don't understand. It's not clear to me why my contribution would have some benefit for your business. So I don't want to take your money or even write a proposal, since I don't understand that. And maybe we can, in that phone call, the initial one and only phone call, maybe we can go a little bit long, and maybe me saying like, you know what, I'm going to take my hat out of the ring, is the trigger that gets them to be like, oh no, this is going to be huge for us. Oh really? Why? We've been talking about this for an hour and it's still not clear to me what the business case is. Why would you give me $1 million to come in here and do this list of things? I don't see how you're going to benefit from that. And then they might blurt out what's obvious to them but has not been yet communicated to you. So I want all of that pressure. I want that pressure in the sales interview so that I really understand their underlying motivation and their desired outcome, and I can place some kind of guesstimated value on that. So that's why I don't present. Well, that's one reason why I don't present the proposal live. Another reason is having written the proposal and then being in like a live conversation with them, second meeting or maybe third meeting. Not for me, but maybe for you. The more meetings that you have, and the more emotionally invested you are in landing the deal, the more time you have put into landing the deal, the more you're going to want to land the deal. So if you're in the meeting and they are starting to be, you're getting like the sense that they're not buying it, like literally and figuratively, it's going to it's going to encourage you to start to pitch, and it's going to start to feel desperate, and you're going to start to lose control of the power frame. You're going to start to lose negotiating control or power, and I just don't want to set myself up for that. I don't want to kind of see their blank expression as I'm kind of trying to run through the deal, and and then try and accidentally give in to the urge to try to convince them. I never want to be in a position where I'm trying to convince someone of something. I'm trying to like get out of them why it would be good for them to hire someone like me. And it creates in presenting in person creates a dynamic that encourages me to do something I don't want to do. So I just avoid it by not having the meeting. If you are super disciplined about that, then that's not a concern for you. But for me, that's a concern. A related concern, it's very similar, but it's not quite the same thing, is that having a live presentation of the proposal opens you up to the possibility of a high pressure price negotiation. And again, I just don't want to put myself in that situation. I'm pretty good, and I've learned my lines. I'm pretty good at knowing how to combat objections, but I much prefer to do it over a text-based format where I can think a little bit, and it's not a high pressure situation where I have to, it's like I'm thinking on my feet like a performance art, especially on camera or in person. You can do it, and people who are good at it can do it. It's just one of those things, and maybe I can do it too, but I just don't want to do it. So I prefer to just, send the email with the proposal and 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 let the chips fall where they may. And then the last thing is kind of obvious, but I don't like having meetings, so I don't want to put another meeting in my schedule. Um, the way I would see this kind of a meeting, it, I don't want to have a meeting like this where I feel like this is my last ditch effort to close the deal. I want that last effort to be in the sales interview before I even decide to write a proposal. So it's to me, it's very important personally to have that wrapped up before I write the proposal. Because once I write it, there's just that much more time and emotional investment into the deal, and I don't want to get encouraged by that. The sunk cost of that, I don't want. I that can encourage me to start to pitch or lower my price or whatever. So I don't want those incentives. That's why I don't do it. If you want to present them live in person and you are not, you feel like you have enough control of yourself to not be subject to those temptations, then by all means present it live. That's fine. If you are going to send it via email, the next question always is, what should I write in the email? And my thinking on this is that the email shouldn't have anything important in it. I want everything important to be inside of the proposal. So the email is going to be very short. It'll say something like, "Hey Alice, here's that proposal you requested for the mobile project. Um, I'll loop back with you on Thursday if I haven't heard anything back." That's it. And then I attach yours, Jay, and then I would attach the PDF. Now the real reason to do this, a big, probably the biggest invisible reason to do this, is that this person, there's a fairly reasonable likelihood that they're going to show this proposal to other people in their organization, maybe trusted partners, maybe their spouse, maybe colleagues at similar companies. And I want all of the information that someone would need to make a buying decision to be in that PDF. I don't want some of it in the email, so then it's missing in the PDF when this person who you've never talked to reads through it. The way I teach proposal writing, anybody should be able to read the proposal, having never met you, not knowing the business. Anybody should be able to read it and be like, this seems like a good deal. It should be that clear. So don't take any of that information and think, oh, well, I put it in the email, I don't need to put it in the proposal, or I put it in both places. I guess you could put it in both places, but that's just wasting their time. So I just keep the email very short. It's like, hey, as promised, here's that proposal you requested. I'll follow up on Thursday if I haven't heard back. Simple as that. All right. So this brings us to the following up piece. And this people really get wrapped around the axle here. And I understand why. Because once they send the proposal, assuming they send it, or even if you present it in person, if the client ghosts you, it's like it's kind of like that, you know, after the first date, like, how long should I wait before I call? And like it gets really complicated. And the thing that you don't want to do, just like the date example, is you don't want to appear too eager or too desperate because that just cedes control or cedes power in the negotiation. So what hasn't happened yet and probably will or could is a negotiation around the price or the terms or something. So you want to maintain as much perceived it's not I don't see it as a zero sum thing really. It's a win-win proposition, but you just don't want to come across desperate. You don't want to come across like you need this project so bad. So because not only would that open you up to getting annihilated by a real poker player on the other side, but it can erode their confidence in your abilities if you're not in demand, if you're not booked up, if this one particular deal is such a huge thing that can erode their confidence, and that can actually affect, first of all, the deal, but second of all, the delivery. If you do get the deal, where they're a little bit less confident in your abilities if you appeared desperate to get the job. Okay, so as I started out with, the trick here is to have an expiration date on the proposal. If you do that, and if in the email that you send, you tell them in advance, you're going to follow up on Thursday if I haven't heard back, then if they ghost you, it doesn't seem desperate when you email them because you're just keeping a promise that you made. So you send it on, say, Monday or whatever, and then 3 days later, it's Thursday, and like, hey, Alice, following up as promised. Just could you just reply and let me know that you got the proposal and you're not still waiting for it? Maybe it got lost in your inbox, maybe it went to spam, who knows? But yeah, we're going to talk specifically about all the follow-up messages in a sec, but that is the premise. One of the things that could be happening if you've been in conversation back and forth over time with this client, and then they spend an hour maybe with one or two or three of their people on the phone with you, they're probably reasonably serious, or they wouldn't be spending their time to do that, to answer all the why conversation questions and entertain the idea of reading your proposal and all of that. So they're probably reasonably serious. If they get your proposal and then you don't hear back, they don't even say they got it, like nothing, just totally ghost you. I would say the odds are pretty good that they're like, these prices seem a little high. Let's shop around a little bit. So it could be that they're shopping around. So again, having that expiration date in there is super important. So they can't just shop around forever. At some point, they need to make a decision, and 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 you're very clear upfront about when that decision needs to be made by. All right, so let's look at the follow-up messages. The first one is after the 3 business days, and that was the one I just talked about. So you sent the proposal on a Monday. There's just no reply, nothing. Then I would send that, "Hey, Alice, just wanna make sure you got the proposal. I hope you're not still waiting for me." Because imagine the scenario where they are still waiting for the proposal, and they're just like, "Geez, this person said they were gonna send this to me on Monday and never did." So this is a perfectly reasonable follow-up, and there's nothing desperate about it. In fact, you're kind of being you're being the more professional one in this situation, assuming they did get it. So if they got it, they didn't even have the courtesy to let you know that they got it and give you some kind of like, "Hey, maybe we're busy this week, but we'll follow up on date," or whatever. If they didn't have the courtesy to do that, then I would consider that a little bit unprofessional. And what you're doing is demonstrating that you are very professional in that you want to, without any kind of, you're not accusing them of not getting back to you. You just want to make sure it didn't get lost in your inbox. I want to make sure you're not still waiting on me. So it's not like accusatory, and you're keeping the promise that you made in the original email. You said you'd follow up on Thursday if you didn't hear anything. You didn't hear anything. And now you're keeping your promise by following up. At sidebar, I do this with like pretty much any kind of sales conversation, email kind of conversation, whenever I'm in a conversation with it's usually most important with someone new, someone who you've never met before. They're probably considering buying something. I'll generally there's some exceptions, but my default is to always say when the next follow-up is gonna be. So it's never like, even if it was a cold outreach, I wouldn't say, "Get in touch if you ever needed anything," and just, like, leave this open-ended thing on their end. I would say it's like, "Hey, I'll follow up on date if I haven't heard back, or I'll follow up on date to check the status. I understand that, you're in the middle of another project. You said it should be done in 6 weeks. I'll follow up on date to see how it's going." And just always be planting this seed so that every time you do follow up, instead of appearing desperate, you are keeping a promise. You're being professional. And so this is probably the most important place to do it is once you've sent a proposal out. So you'll see that as we go through these. So the next one I would do 7 days later. So if you sent it on, or 5 business days. So if you sent the proposal on a Monday, then on the next Monday, I'd send them out, it's like, "Hey," and this again, you haven't heard anything back from them. They're probably shopping it around. So I would say, "Yeah, FYI, it's only a week until the proposal expires." Like, you put this in your own words and be as polite as you want, but keep it short so that they can just reply very easily. So that it's not like, oh, they don't have to write a big book or, "Any questions?" I don't do that. I'll just say like, "Hey, just so you know," because they might not have even read it or they might have missed it. "Just so you know, the proposal expires on date, or there's only a week until the expiration date. So, please let me know that you at least received it and you're not still waiting on me," something like that. So they're getting these reminders in a cadence that they're expecting. So, in the 3-day email, you would say, "I'll follow up on Monday if I still hadn't heard for anything." And then Monday, it's like, "Hey, following up as promised. Just so you know, the proposal expires on Friday. So, if you want to move forward, let me know." Okay, so then 13 days later, this gets a little complicated with holidays and weekends, Monday holidays and stuff like that. But basically, the business day before the proposal is actually going to expire, I'll say, I get a little sterner. I get a little bit more like, I kind of let a tone of "you've been wasting my time" creep into my message because they have. So I would say, "Hey, following up as promised, just so you know, I can't guarantee my availability or pricing after tomorrow." So what this is doing is making it clear what the consequences are if they're just going to keep shopping this around forever and ever. So maybe they're the, I don't know, the CMO, and the CFO or the COO or the CEO was horrified by the prices and like, "Jeez, we all agree that we really want to work with this person. This is more expensive than we expected. CMO, go out and get me some other quotes." So now what you're doing is giving the CMO ammunition to go back to whoever insisted that they go get other quotes and say, "Look, we could maybe work with Bob, but he's not going to guarantee the prices in the proposal or whatever the start date was going to be." So if the start date was going to be the following Monday or 2 Mondays away, they might want to get started quickly. So they're going to potentially lose time, the start date, which is an opportunity cost for them, or the prices might go up because they're not going to assume they're going to go down. So if you give the the decider, the person who brought you in, your main contact, if you give them ammunition to sort of go to the other people who might be approving the budget, then they can say to them, "Look, if we want to do this, we need to do it now. If we want to lock in these prices and we want to lock in this schedule. If I need to keep shopping around, could maybe never start or maybe get more expensive. So can we just make a decision on this? I haven't heard back from like 5 other people. We need to make a decision." So it's just ratcheting up slightly in a professional, polite way the pressure for them to make a decision. It could be no, it could be yes, but you want a decision of some kind. Okay, so now if the expiration date passes and it's been 2 weeks. So you had a conversation, you came to conceptual agreement, you said, okay, if you want me to write a proposal, I can have it to you by Monday. They say, yes, we want a proposal. You go through that effort, you create the proposal, and now 2 weeks later, they have not even replied to you, not even to say they've received it. I would, eh, I mean, 99 times out of 100, there could be extenuating circumstances, but 99 times out of 100, I'm going to write this client off. They're not serious. They're tire kickers. They went with someone else and they're too embarrassed to tell me. But to me, the deal is dead. If you're in that 1% situation where you really want to potentially revive the deal, then after 21 days, I would send the magic email. And you've probably seen the magic email before. You can go to the magicemail.com if you want a specific example. There's also Blair Enns also has a version on his website, Win Without Pitching. But basically, it's an unemotional, sort of cut and dry, short, curt kind of message. And I'm paraphrasing it, but it's basically, hey, since I haven't heard back from you, I'm going to assume you went in a different direction. Sometimes you see, so I'll be closing the books on this or whatever, or your priorities have changed. But it's basically a breakup message. And the reason they call it the magic email is because it is incredible how often you'll get a reply within 5 minutes that's either a yes or an explanation of what's going on. And it's usually a no. It's usually that they did find someone else and they just were too chicken to tell you, or they're just such a low priority that they didn't tell you. But a lot of times, not most times, I would say, but a lot of times they'll be like, no, 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 we were all on vacation, or someone was in a car accident, or like we're reorganizing the office, or there's some other thing and we're just way behind on everything. Sometimes that happens, and they'll say, no, we're really, really interested. And then I would reply, be like, okay, when can I expect, or when can I expect to hear back, or when do you expect this issue to be over? And then I would do my usual thing, which is like, okay, great. I'll contact you on date if I haven't heard back by then. And one time, just as an experiment, I didn't write off a client and I had sent a proposal and they were like, they didn't ghost me, but they had another internal project going on and it was monopolizing all of the time of one particular person who I was going to be working with. And so they didn't want her time to be split between the thing I was going to do and the thing she was currently working on. So I kept emailing for project status. And just as a test, almost as a joke to myself, I was like, I'm never going to stop following up on this proposal until they say we decided not to do it. And I think I followed up for 9 months. It was like, hey, just checking in to see how that project status is. It was supposed to be done, it was supposed to be done like 6 weeks earlier or whatever, or 6 months earlier. Hey, just checking in to see if that project is done yet or no. They'd be like, oh, it's just taking way longer than we expected. I'd say, okay, that's fine. I understand. That must be really frustrating. I'll check back in 4 weeks on date and, to check another status update if I haven't heard from you before then. I did this for like 9 months. And eventually the other project did finally finish and they did actually greenlight this old project. I did honor the prices. We actually had a conversation about that early on, and it was fine. It was a situation where it was fine to honor the prices. So I did do that, and then it ended up being like, I don't know, it was $70,000, very, very low lift. It was mid 5-figure project that went on for, a few months. So it was worth doing. And sometimes it does work. Normally I wouldn't do it. Normally I would just go out and try and get more prospects in my pipeline and have more proposals in flight at the same time. I think that feels really good, at least to me. So yeah, so if you have ever struggled with like, how should I send my proposal? How should I present it? What should I put in it? So that I can deal with somebody who ghosts me, or how to follow up with them, and then not knowing what to say in the messages because everything you write just feels desperate and overly servile, and it's sort of like an employee kind of begging sort of thing. This is the way to do it, and I've taught tons of people how to do this, and it takes all of the power back onto your side. So you do need to be willing to walk away from any particular project, but that's where having things in the pipeline comes in. Cool. Okay, so that is it for this piece. Well, we got about 30 minutes in, so let's see if there are any questions. I can stop sharing my screen. Cool. I see two questions so far, so let me jump in there. If a question pops into your head while we're talking, just look for the Q&A tab and add it in, and we will cover them. Okay, so the first question is, how would you react if they ask for a more detailed cost breakdown of your proposal, like number of hours and for teams, numbers of people assigned to the project in an attempt to reverse engineer your effective hourly rate? Okay, so this shouldn't hopefully this wouldn't happen in the proposal stage. Hopefully this kind of thing would crop up in the sales interview where you're so focused, you get them so focused on the value of the outcome, and that is what you write about. I mean, this today we're not talking about everything, how to write a proposal and the template and how to negotiate and all that stuff, but this is a good question. If you do get a question like this after they receive the proposal, it could mean that the prices are a little bit on the high side and they're trying to justify for themselves what the value might be or what the cost to you might be. So like they're like, geez, 50,000 seems like a lot. Well, maybe it's harder than we thought. And so it might be that they're kind of trying to help you justify to them why the price is so high. But the problem with their thinking is they're imagining that you're basing your price on your costs. And if you're doing value-based proposals anyway, you wouldn't be doing that. You'd be basing it on the value to them. So the conversation here, your task here in this kind of a conversation is to get them back to thinking about value, not costs. So if the specific question was, where was it? How to react if they ask for a more detailed cost breakdown, like number of hours. So number of hours, I would reply, we don't know how many hours it's going to take. That's why I give you a fixed price. We have a general idea of how long things like this might take, and maybe you give them a wide range, like, it won't be less than 3 months of full-time effort or man hours or person hours. Maybe you can give them a range, but you really need to get them away from that kind of thinking. It's like what you do instead is you say, we don't know how many hours it is. That's why we gave you a fixed price. So that if it takes us longer than expected, that's our problem, not yours. And you illustrate to them that you are taking the risk of scope creep or unexpected changes or big surprises that, again, increase the scope or the level of effort. So if you point out that you're taking that risk for them, then that's one approach to getting the conversation back to value. Another thing to do, this is probably a little tougher to do over email, but if you do have some kind of follow-up conversation with them, they could say, well, they could say, oh, could you give us a more detailed cost breakdown of your proposal, like number of hours? And I would say, we don't really know how many hours it's going to take. Why do you ask? And they might say, well, because his price is like twice as much as the next people. And then I would get into the whole, like, well, are the other people standing behind their price? Is it a fixed price, or are they just giving you an estimate for, let's say your proposal is 100,000 and your contact says, well, the next most expensive shop was only 50,000. And we really want to work with you, but that's a big difference. So then I would say, well, are they willing to stand behind that price? And that's the final price. And they're almost certainly going to say no, it's an estimate. And so then you can say, well, our price is a final price. Like if it takes us twice as long, you won't pay a dime more. And maybe that will convince them. Or they could say, if they did say yes, that is a fixed price. They're willing to do a fixed price at 50K. Your fixed price is 100K. And I would say, well, if you don't see any differences between us and them, then you should go with them. And they might say, well, no, we would much rather work with you. And I'd say, well, these are the options. Like you can work with someone who you think is not as good, if that suits your risk tolerance and your budget, or you can work with someone who you think is going to do a much better job. In our conversation, you said that this project was very high risk. It was very important to get it done right the first time. But it's up to you. You know, if you want to go with the cheaper option and you don't see any meaning, go ahead. What else did they say? What else happens? Uh, Another thing that you could do, if you said, "Why do you ask?" and they said, "Just it just feels too risky. It's like a really big outlay." Then you could propose a different starter engagement. So let's say it's some kind of implementation project and it's maybe 100,000 and they're like, "Geez, this seems like really risky, or really too big of an investment or more than we were planning on investing." Then you could say, "Well, we could perhaps we could break it into phases so that we know more, smaller investments spread out over time." So we could start out with sort of depending on what you do, some sort of road mapping engagement, a strategy engagement, strategic planning engagement, a architecture diagram, something like that. Essentially, a paid diagnostic where you do a paid deeper dive than you could do on a 1 hour sales interview. And if the implementation is probably going to be about 100,000, then it's not unreasonable to spend a tenth of that to de-risk the bigger thing, or to break it into phases, or maybe it's a cash flow thing for them. Maybe they just met you and they trust you, but they don't trust you. So you could sort of start the relationship with it. Let's say, well, let's just do a $10,000, whatever you call it, roadmap, strategic plan, blueprint, architecture. And at the end of that, you can take it to anyone to implement it. It's not locked into us. You could take it to someone else. You could shop it around, find someone cheaper, and go from there. Or we will revisit our proposal, because the scope will probably the scope it will be different. Things will change as we go through this first process, and we can give you three options for the implementation based on our involvement in the implementation based on what we find in our find in the diagnostic. So a bunch of different things you can do there. I talk about this in a lot of other places, but I think those are the big ones. So hopefully that helped. All right. The next question is, do the timelines change when the dollars involved is much different? Like for a $1 million project, maybe the cycle would be longer and the decision-making process longer. Yeah, I mean, probably. So the amount of money depends on how much money it seems like, depends on the buying power of the client and the value perception. So the if if they have something that they want really bad and you can contribute to helping them get that, they believe that you can contribute to helping them get this thing they want really, really badly, and they have an enormous amount of buying power, and they see very few or no alternatives to working with you. Their options are limited to one, like you're a category of one. Then $1 million might not seem like that big a deal. It might not. Generally speaking, $1 million is going to seem like a significant investment to lots of people. It depends on the thing, though. $1 million to build a building, that's not that much. It depends on what you're doing. But I take your point. If the dollar amount is higher, it can take longer for the decision-making process. And if like enterprise sales is just a famously long sales cycle. But I wouldn't, in an enterprise sales situation, trying to decide where I put the effort. So I had an interview with Dan Mall on Ditching Hourly. It was a couple of years ago. He mostly sold design like services, system, what do you call it? Design systems to big organizations. I think MIT or Harvard was, like in his sales cycles, he said, for something like 9 months, if I remember correctly. And the way that he would deal with that wasn't anything special. He would say something like, he'd present the proposal and they would say no. And they'd say, it's just too much. And he'd say, okay, why don't you look around? Maybe you can find someone else, find someone better. If you can, that's, no harm, no foul. It's no skin off my nose. In the meantime, I'll leave you on my mailing list so that you'll get continuous updates about, my latest thinking about this stuff that perhaps you could share with if you hire someone else, you could share with them or kind of help educate your team around what you're looking for. And they would say, okay. And so if you just leave him on his mailing list, and it was not uncommon. I don't want to put words in his mouth, so go listen to the interview. But as I recall, he would end up landing those deals, 9 months later. So it's almost like an automated follow up instead of the kind of manual follow up I described just in that 2 week period. But in terms of the sale, yeah, probably the bigger the amount seems to the buyer, the more they're probably going to think about it. I don't know if that does that help. What do I think the underlying question is here, though? I'm going to guess you mean by the timelines thing. You're talking about the expiration date. Here's the thing about extending the expiration. Some people use a month. So some people say, this expires in 30 days. To me, for the kinds of projects I did, which were generally high five figure, low six figure, because I didn't want to take on any more risk than that. So I would always break projects into smaller chunks than perhaps they came to me initially. So I would break stuff down into like some, maybe 70 to $150,000 type price tags. And if they're serious, they're like their hair's probably on fire. They wanted to start 3 weeks ago. So generally speaking, 14 days was plenty for me. If you're doing enterprise sales, maybe you switch it to 30 days. But the thing that you don't want to do is make it like you're going to honor these prices forever. Like in a year, your prices might be way higher. You might be doing great. You might be book solid. So you don't want them to expect, just as a courtesy to them, you don't want them to expect that they're just going to roll up on some Friday 6 months from now and be like, okay, we're ready to get started. And then you can say, well, as you recall, I said after the 2 week period or 30-day period, whatever it is, that I wasn't going to be able to honor the timeline or the prices. So we need to have a new conversation. We need to like revisit this. And that's going to look like essentially starting over. Yeah, maybe not completely starting over. It depends on your situation, but it's not, you just cannot allow them to show up on a Friday and be like, let's start Monday, and then probably want you to start before they even make a payment at all. So just be careful about extending that deadline too far. I really wouldn't extend it past 30 days. I don't care how big the client is. It's like, just move on. If they're not ready to make a decision, then they're just not ready to make a decision. All right. What is the typical amount of time you invest in the client meeting and writing the proposal? Okay, this is an easy answer. Usually there'd be an email or two. And if I felt like they weren't tire kickers and they were a serious buyer, I would send them a link to book a call. It'd be like a sales interview where I'd go through, tell me about the project. I'd ask the why conversation questions, and that, generally speaking, take almost exactly an hour every time. Sometimes it go a little longer. Usually not shorter. Almost never shorter, because they want a brain dump for 20 minutes before I can start asking real questions. So there'd be about, so like, I don't know, 15 minutes of email, an hour conversation. And at the end of the conversation, if I've gotten really solid answers to the why conversation questions, and I understand the business case for making an investment with me, like I understand what they're going to get out of it. I understand how they're going to judge the success or failure of this project. Then and I'm confident that I can help move the needle for them. Then I would say, all right, this is great. I'm going to give you it would be okay if I had a draft to you. If I'm really close to the person, I might say, is it okay if I have a draft to you on Wednesday or whatever, whenever I can get it to them? Or I'll say, I can imagine like probably 3 different ways we could work together on this. Would it be okay if I sent you a few options and a proposal on date? And they always say yes. So then if I got all my questions answered, in the sales interview, and I cover these in on my podcast and my mailing list, but I have templates inside of Automatic Proposals that just you can print out and just fill in the blank. If you do that, then it probably takes me, I don't know, 60 minutes to write a proposal for a $150,000 project. You start to find over time that you can reuse a lot of stuff as you refine your target market and your specialization, your area of expertise. There's a lot of stuff that you can reuse, and it doesn't need to be this long. Even when I was doing software development projects, my proposals were five pages long. I didn't get into, you know, the olden days when we used to be like, okay, it's going to have this many tables, and here's the entity relationship diagram, and these are going to be all the fields in each table, and this is going to blah 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 blah. I just never believed that anybody read that. It felt more like me typing up a bunch of stuff to justify a big price tag. Instead of that, I'm like, here's where your business currently is. You're doing great, but you want to do better. Here's where you'd like to be in, 6 to 9 months or 2 to 3 years or whatever. You reached out to me because I'm the expert at this, that, and the other that would contribute to this outcome that you want. I was recommended by Charlie, who we did similar work for, and we hit huge home runs for. So that, okay, now like right off the bat, you're talking about the transformation of the client, not hours, not scope, not like diagrams, and it's all this stuff. Like that stuff will come later. The big picture is company wants to transform in this particular way, and you're uniquely qualified to do it for these reasons. And then you say, all right, I've got this, this idea of what the value might be to a company like this at a time like this. The value is, let's just say 100, and I would reverse engineer, okay, what could I do for 10,000? What could I do for 22,000? What could I do for $50,000 to help move the needle for this client who wants this $100,000 transformation? It doesn't take that long. Like once you're into this process, once you have all the templates and you know how to do it, then the key is to just get your questions answered in the phone call. If you can do that, the proposal writes itself. It's almost like Mad Libs. You just fill in the blanks. So total time, maybe 2 hours. If you include, if they ghost you and you include follow-up, maybe 2 hours. Probably not even. All right. Next question. Piggybacking on that question, I recently had a client who has a pattern of asking for several items. I value price it collectively, and then interact. I recently had a client who has a pattern of asking for several items. I value price it collectively, and then retract interest in a particular component and ask for a revised proposal. Any thoughts on dealing with this behavior? Yes. Okay, so it sounds like they're a list of features that they want. Then you give them a price, and then they reprioritize based on the price for features, let's just say. Or if it's not features, it's deliverables. It's like, okay, if it's going to be that much for all of these features or deliverables, then we don't want to spend that much. So if we prioritize what are our top 5 and we take off these 2, then what are we looking at? And the issue here is that your pricing, I would double check that you're actually value pricing it. How do you know what the value is if you have determined the value of each of these items, which feels a little too granular to me? It feels like a to-do list, a punch list of things they want fixed around their house. And that's a different kind of work. That's more like, if that's the case, then that's more like support and maintenance kind of work or ongoing implementation type of work. Value pricing is for projects. A project has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Maintenance never stops. Building never stops. Like if you're just like growing the product or growing the feature set, that's never really going to stop. So that might not be the best use of your expertise. So if you're really good at whatever it is that you do, the initial project is where most of the value is. Most of the value is in the thing that the client considers to be the riskiest or the biggest potential upside. So it could be that they say, hey, we want these 7 things done. And if it's presented in that way, it's tricky, but you could, in theory, say to them, well, let's jump on a call so I can understand what the business case is for these features. And then if they say okay, then you jump on the call and you say, let's back up. Okay, I've got this list of things. We both know I can do all these things. Why are these the things? Like what are you hoping to get out of it? So let's say I wave a magic wand and you've got these 7 things. What are you going to do next? What do you expect to happen after that? Just to make sure I build it in a way that's going to support whatever your business goals are going forward and not just ticking boxes on, a marketing page. So it's possible that you could, um, get them to say, like, well, it'll be, after this happens, then it's going to reduce. We really need these things. We feel like it's going to reduce churn. There's a new competitor that has all these features, and we've heard on our Facebook group page for customers that a lot of people are talking about this competitor, and it's got these 7 features that we don't have. So they're trying to kind of keep up with the Joneses to decrease churn. Then I would say, this is a tough pivot, but this is how I would try and do it. I would say, well, I can implement these 7 things a lot of different ways. If I understand you correctly, what we really want to do is decrease the churn. Maybe some of these things aren't really required for that. What are the top 3? Have them prioritize it right then. And they might say, well, it depends on how much they cost. And you say, if leaving cost out of it, I'm just going to give you a price for the things you find most urgent. I want to quote you the smallest possible price to move you forward. So what are the top 3 things that are most important? And I'll quote those and just keep them focused on outcomes and success metrics. Like, how are you going to know if this is a success? Well, the chatter will die down in the Facebook group and people will start getting all excited about the fact that we're launching these new features. Like, okay, I'm going to give you a proposal to make that happen based on the information that you've given me here. And in their minds, you need to flip it from you giving them a price for a like button and, multiple account sign-ins or whatever, single sign-on, instead of giving them prices for those individual things based on how much work you think it's going to take. Be like, what are we trying to accomplish with this list of things? Let's focus on that, because if we don't, I could do a whole bunch of work that won't get us there. All right. This is a tough pivot, especially if you've been working with this client for a long time. It sounds like there's a pattern. So it sounds like you've been working with them on an ongoing basis. They might not want to have this kind of a conversation with you, in which case I would probably say to myself, this is a low value client. I want to get high value clients that are new and focused on the outcomes, not the inputs, my hours, my team, or my deliverables. I want people who are focused on the big picture. I want to sell the big picture, and I want to decide how I'm going to contribute to the big picture. And as you get more clients that want to engage with you at a higher altitude, you can let clients like these go. Or, since we have time, or you could come up with a productized service where for X dollars per month, they get you part-time. They get you not hours, not some number of hours, but for, let's say, $5,000 a sprint, you will get, or whatever you want, whatever. You can have me for $5,000 a sprint. The beginning of each sprint, we'll decide what goes into the list for the week. We will mutually agree to what will fit in the 2 weeks. I will give you, and I will do those things in the 2 weeks, and then we'll just keep going like that. And that's nothing about hours. That's nothing about hours. It's about agreeing to what is going to get done in the 2 weeks. And if at the end of every 2 weeks, they're happy with what got done for the amount of money they paid you, then you can keep going without promising them any hours. And you can start to tool up and use plugins and get, I don't know, Copilot or something to help you write code faster. I'm assuming you're a coder. That might be completely wrong. But if you can optimize your ability to crank through backlog, and you haven't promised hours, you just promised that every 2 weeks you'll do whatever you agreed to do at the beginning of the 2 weeks, then you have separated your time from money, and you've got this recurring $5,000 coming in every 2 weeks, where these are $10,000 a month, however you want to do it. And the client is happy. They can just keep throwing these things into Trello or wherever, and you just keep banging them out. So a lot of options there. Good question. Thanks for that. All right. see if my button doesn't want to work. There we go. Okay. All right, the last question. And before I get into this, everybody watching is going to get a follow-up email from me with a link to the replay and things that I've mentioned along the way, like the proposal template and so forth. All right, so here we go. The last question is, I usually walk them, the client, through the proposal and then send them an email with the attached proposal and the pricing and 2 follow-up emails. It works sometimes and sometimes it does not work. What am I doing wrong? Presenting it without prices. I trying I'm trying to think of the of a pro and con to this. What is the pro of this? What is the reason to do this? I guess this would give you time to think. It kind of extends the initial meeting with time to think about how to write the proposal or what you think the client really wants. I guess it just sort of extends the first meeting, and then you come to them with your thoughts, kind of like a draft. Like, hey, I'm thinking these might be attractive options. And they'll say, and then I don't know, I guess you would get into a discussion at that point about what they do and don't value. But as a buyer, I'd kind of be annoyed by this because it's like, just give me a price, right? You know, whether you have someone roof your garage or whatever, it's like, just give me a price. And it's like, okay, I need to understand what we're trying to do here first, but I will give you a price. And so if you stretch this out into the sales meeting, then you write a proposal, and then you send them a draft with no prices. Oh, wait. I thought you said you had another meeting. You don't have another meeting with them. You just go back and forth over email. The proposal and send. No, you do. Okay, so you have a meeting with them. You draft a proposal. You walk them through it. And then you send them an email with pricing and then 2 follow-up emails. And it feels really dragged out to me. I mean, if you need to do that for practice to get better at writing the proposal. So if you find that when you are drafting the proposal and then walking them through it, there are a lot of changes, that is an area for improvement so that you get the answers you need in the first conversation instead of in the second conversation. It feels a little overly collaborative. I understand that, you want to customize it to the client and everything, but at a certain point, I'd rather see this, if you're not going to close every deal, but once you get good at uncovering the desired outcome, their underlying motivation, the impact on their business, why they think you are uniquely qualified to contribute to this outcome. If you can uncover all those things in that first 60 minutes, the proposal will write itself. And you've basically agreed to conceptually all of the important big picture things. So the proposal is almost a formality. So like having them co-create the proposal with you in this kind of review meeting feels like, if you need to do that to feel like you've really gotten a good proposal, I think that's okay. But I would try to get that all into one phone call. Try and think on your feet a little bit more, have a little bit more of notes next to you of these are the questions I need to get answered by the end of the call, or I'm not going to write a proposal at all. So if you can do that, I think so. I would aspire to be able to get all of that done in one phone call for your own time reasons and for the client's time reasons. And then once you present it, the price is the price. I've never lowered a price. I've never lowered a price on a proposal. Once I send it, it's like, right before I hit send, I'm like, okay, am I cool with it if they say no, it's too expensive? Like, am I cool with these prices? And then I'm like, yep, I'm cool with it. If I lose it, that's fine. Send it, forget about it, go get another client. So I mean, my close rate was really good, you know, probably in the 70s or 80s, which I think is pretty high close rate, especially for bigger deals for a soloist. Um, but the trick there is being seen as the go-to person for what I did because I wrote, you know, books for O'Reilly about this particular subject. So when people said, "Get me an expert on mobile," like my name came up. All their developers, all their web developers had my book on their desk with like coffee stains all over it. It's like, get this guy. So so honestly, I think if you're having trouble with your close rate, it could be the way the proposal process goes, but it could also be that you're I don't know if this is true, but if you're perceived kind of apples to apples with other competitors, then you've got some positioning work to do. So, either niching down or specializing in some way that makes you unique to your ideal buyers, that'll help a lot. Then you can sort of make more mistakes in the sales and proposal writing process, the negotiating process, if they just feel like they don't have any alternatives. So it might not be the greatest proposal, but like you're the person they want. So it's like, well, if this is the price, this is the price. So all of this stuff is, positioning and writing proposals and the why conversation. It all is, yeah, related. It's all kind of feeds each other. So there are different levers you can move, but hopefully that helped. All right, folks, we're just right at the top of the hour now. I want to say thanks to everyone who joined. Thanks for everyone who stayed. That's awesome. And I will send out a replay link to this for as long as it's up. And what else? And links to like the proposal template and whatever else I mentioned. Yeah. Okay. So great. Look for that email. It should be coming in the next, probably today. Should be today. And if you have any more questions, you can either hit me up via email, or if you're in Ditcherville, then you can just ask me questions there. See you next time.